All right, welcome into a special edition of Chatterbox Reds. We are ever so close to opening day, and tonight was a special night because it was a celebration game. And it's maybe something they're going to do every single year, but they decided to play the top prospects against the Cincinnati Reds here at Air Ballpark in Dayton, Ohio. We're the home of the Dragons. First time here, by the way, for you.
First time. Fantastic ballpark. Been to a lot of minor league parks. I don't think anyone even comes close to Dayton. Got to see the Dragons a lot on the road. Nice to finally see them in the home building. Shout out to Tom Nichols, who set up and ran everything with his event. The absolute best in the business. Just a great event, and I hope they do this every year.
Yeah, and there's been rumors that they might do this every single year. We'll see. Obviously, Terry Francona seemed like he had mentioned pregame that he was a proponent of this. He wanted to get his guys kind of in a stadium atmosphere, as he said, in a climate that they're going to probably have to deal with, let's be honest, for the next month, right? It's not the worst weather tonight, but it certainly was cold. I think that would be the appropriate term. Got down into the 40s. And you can tell which guys probably from the Dominican or which guys are from the South that play on this roster. They weren't big fans of the cold weather out there. But overall, a lot of things to discuss tonight. There's still the question mark of who's going to be the kind of final roster spots. We got to see some guys that were hurt last year. They got some quality at bats in today. Even some guys last year, like a guy like Jake Fraley, who had some issues or struggled, if you will, had a good day. Again, how much we're going to make of one day of baseball, it's kind of hard to figure out, but we can, like we do in spring training, highlight the positives, downplay the negatives, and hopefully push on. And you know what? I will say the most important thing that could have possibly happened tonight did happen, and that was nobody got hurt, to my knowledge. To be fair,
there was a few hit batters that made us a little nervous, but everyone seemed okay from that. Luis May, right. My guy, came in firing. But no, everyone appeared to be healthy. All looked well, and onward to Thursday.
Yeah, so I mean, for the Reds, they put out a lineup that looks like something that you probably were going to see on opening day, absent Austin Hayes. I think it's fair to say that maybe the only difference is Jeimer Candelario is probably going to play third base. Santiago Espinal is probably not going to start at third base. But here's kind of where I'm at to start this show off on. Maybe the take foot is like all of these arguments that many of these people are going to have over who's going to get the final roster spot. Where's this guy going to play? Where's that guy going to play? It's going to sort itself out over the next month and a half, 2 months. And, I'm not saying it doesn't matter right now, but it just reminds me last year, every single time, somebody got sent down or called up, there'd be people hollering about why is this person getting sent down? It's like, well, they're just sending him down because he's not going to be available for the next 3 days. And then they're going to call him back up. And you guys are all getting in I guess in a hurry to get mad about something that doesn't matter. I'm not saying that I don't care who makes this final roster spot between, whether it be Hurtubise, whether it be Dunn, or whether it be Stuart Fairchild. I would probably say Hurtubise is on the outside looking in for me, but I guess what I'm saying, Nick, is I'm not going to be overly upset no matter what they decide to do. I do think, and I asked you this earlier, and I guess I'll start the question off with you, is I do think there's a chance that if they decide to go with Hurtubise and Dunn, that you're going to find yourself in a position where you're out of options with Fairchild. Will he get through waivers? It's possible. And are you worried about it if he's the guy that's left out?
I don't necessarily worried. I also think there's a real chance the Reds still pick someone up in the 11th hour. If there wasn't, I think the Reds would have made the roster decision.
Okay.
I don't think that anything that happened on Tuesday in Dayton, Ohio, had anything to do with the roster spot. I think they're trying to keep themselves flexible in case someone falls in their lap. Will it happen? I don't know, but I think that's the biggest primary motivation. Fairchild could probably sneak through waivers. I think if this was June, I don't think it would sneak the waivers, but every team is trying to whittle down their 40-man roster. Just about every team is having these tough conversations right now. That may seem silly to a lot of fans, but the diehard fans, you know how important these last roster spots are. I would give it to Fairchild just because I don't see the upside necessarily with either one that makes it a surefire thing. And Fairchild's the one that you can lose. I actually think I would go Fairchild and Hurtubise. Okay. And let me explain why. It's actually because I think Blake Dunn is the best player of all three of those guys. And I think Blake Dunn needs to play every day. And he's not going to play every day up here. He's going to play sporadically, and I don't think that's good for his development. So I don't think I don't think right now he's necessarily a surefire better option than Stuart Fairchild. I'd rather him get everyday at bats, but I also would love to see the Reds pick someone up in the 11th hour and get someone that has a little bit more upside for 2025.
In a game that obviously had what seemed like nothing outrageous that happened that would be shocking, that's going to generate headlines that are going to carry through the day tomorrow. There were some things that took place that probably are worth noting. You have, and I know that this is going to be a little bit of a joking manner, and some people are going to maybe think that we're joking, but I mean, I'm being somewhat sincere when I say this. You have fringe guys currently that had pretty good days. Will Benson did hit one about 500 feet.
Just missed another one.
He also did strike out twice.
He just missed another one.
But I'm just saying, we got to be fair and balanced, as they say. That's what they say. The other side note that I was going to make was Noelvi Marte. Two things that I got to mention. I have to do it. This is a fair and honest show. They announced the starting lineups. I got to do it, Nick. They announced the starting lineups, and for whatever reason, Noelvi Marte decided he wasn't going to go and shake the hands of his teammates that are in line. The reserves. And by the reserves, I mean the prospects, probably the guys that he didn't think he'd ever be playing with again, but he is. He just kind of waved to him and jogged down the line. Meanwhile, every other player, including, by the way, Spencer Steer, who was called after him, ran down to the end and shook their hands. I don't know what that was about. I'm not trying to make a big deal about it, but I have to tell you, it was a little concerning. I got to shoot it straight with the audience. And maybe you're going to make fun of me. Oh, look at you. You're talking about whether or not Noelvi Marte shook hands with the rest of the team. I'm just saying, didn't like it. Wasn't a big fan.
It was not a good look.
It was a bad look.
Maybe he was confused, but it was not a good look.
He wasn't confused. He waved to him. I'm not going to give him an out on that. He actually did get a hit tonight, so that was good to see for Noelvi. But maybe some more serious topics of conversation for around a game like this. Matt McClain did hit the ball hard. Jake Fraley hit the ball very hard. Two guys that the Reds are going to need to have one of these guys that we head into the year that we are questionable on, or we're just not sure what we get, and they're going to have to play well. At least, if nothing else, Jake Fraley, he went a long time last year without showing power. And I think even mentioned the spring wasn't maybe the best. So the fact of the matter is tonight looked good. What do you make of that, if anything?
I don't know. It was good to see Jake Fraley hit the ball hard. Absolutely. Great to see Matt McClain hit the ball out. Now, when they hit their home runs, I think the wind was blowing out about 25 miles an hour.
Fair and balanced. You got to be fair and balanced. You're not wrong. I wasn't going to bring up there was 15-mile-an-hour headwinds, but you did. So
Fraley's, I think, felt a little bit more like a legit homer, if I'm being fair. Matt McClain's, I thought it was a lazy fly ball, and it just kept going and going and going. But good to see the result nonetheless.
Right. I think when you wake up tomorrow, if you're a Reds fan, and you see Matt McClain hit a home run to right field, you get excited about it. If you're somebody that wants to be a pessimist, they're probably going to bring up the fact that like someone like yourself, always negative Nick. Negative Nick, that's what they call him. Anyways, I'm just glad to see good results regardless. Ellie looked like Ellie. Moving over to third base, I will admit, trying to downplay the negatives, Jameer did not look great. During
warmups, he did not play.
He also didn't look great at the plate during the game. But I'm also going to openly tell everybody, I was watching intently when the Reds took warm-up infield. You had basically your regular infield and Espinal and Candelario at third base. I'm rooting for Candelario. I really we kind of need Candelario or we need Santiago Espinal to hit well. Candelario did not look great at third base defensively. I'm being honest. I think he made like 4 or 5 errors.
It just was one after the other.
Well, I mean, he did. And I'm not trying to, alarm the bell, but, we'll see how that all pans out. But the Reds are going to have a decision to be made at some point of what they do at third base, because if Candelario shows what he did last season and then what it looked like he had there during pregame, although it's pregame, it's in Dayton, it's cold, there's a lot of ifs here. They're going to have to figure something out there. So
just to add on a little bit to that, Obviously, there's other options. Gavin Lux. I think you'll probably see a little bit of both. Not necessarily super confident in Gavin Lux at third base.
Right.
I don't think Terry Francona is going to mess around too long. If it becomes a problem, I think Santiago Espinal is going to start playing every day, whether he hits or not.
I think that you have to value the defensive side of the ball that Espinal has. I mean, if you watch him, and again, some people might say that the smoothness doesn't really matter, just make the play, but it's hard not to notice Santiago Espinal when he's out there taking infield. I mean, he's by far and away the smoothest, slickest fielder they have. And it's hard for you not to think if he hits 240 or 250, that he's not providing a better value than you would if you just stuck someone out there that's going to hit 280 or 270, but make a bunch of errors. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. If I was a betting man, which some would say I am, I think Espinal is going to end up taking third base. I really do. Just based off the fact that, defensively, you can't with this bullpen, which we're going to get to in just a second. I do not want there to be a situation in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning where we have to have extra outs. Our starting pitching is good. Yes. I don't know if our bullpen can handle having to get 4 or 5 outs in an inning. And, we're already behind the 8 ball a little bit defensively, certainly in the outfield at times, in the corner spots. So we'll see. It's a long-winded way of me saying that I'm not too sold on Jamier Candelario, and I hope to be. I like to be a candy man. Bullpen. That was actually a little bit of a bright spot tonight. I know that, perhaps you could kind of point fingers at some control problems. Luis May is a guy that came in that we got to see. Maxwell was a guy that got to come in. These guys are not obviously planning on being on the opening day roster or being anywhere near maybe the bullpen at the start of the season. But it was nice to see those guys come in an environment like this. And Maxwell looked fantastic. Luis May, he loaded the bases, but similar to Alexis Diaz, he found a way to get out of it without giving up a run. Pagan threw the ball well. Mole didn't get a chance to come in. I'm trying to think if I missed anybody off the top of my head.
Did warm up in the bullpen, though, in the ninth.
Sam Mole, yeah, he must have just wanted to get some reps in. But nobody came in and looked out of sync or like they weren't, I guess, ready to go, per se. There was a decent amount of people, though, that didn't throw, to be fair.
Zach Maxwell looked incredible.
Yeah.
If he's able to throw strikes at, I'm talking walking guys, maybe 4 batters per 9 inning, he's going to be in the big league sooner rather than later. I don't think his stay in Louisville will be long if he's able to, put 5, 6, 7, 8, appearances in a row where he doesn't really struggle with his commander. It's only maybe one of those times or something like that. He's got the stuff that's absolutely big league ready, that he could be a massive impact, I think, on this team.
All right. Before we go any farther, we want to shout out a couple of sponsors that make all of this possible. DSC, Deep South Commodities, John and his team. Thank you very much for supporting us.
A leader.
He's a leader in renewable energies, specializing in
used cooking oil collection, aggregation,
and sales. Yeah. Visit
www.deepsouthcommodities.com
for more information. Thank you to John and his team at DSC. And as always, if you're ever in a situation where you need some help, feel free to always text and or call 988 day or night. That's a 24-hour hotline. And thank you to our friends at the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation for spreading that word, because there's obviously many people that watch this show. We're very thankful. I want to add the amount of people that are continuing to watch the show on YouTube and also obviously in podcast form, listening in podcast form. It's grown a significant amount. And I think it's grown a lot largely just because people tell other people about it, and then they listen, and I don't know, they appreciate the work that you've done, Nick. And listen, I know that might sound like I'm sucking up to you, but you do an incredible job day in and day out. Put the podcast up, it's there, it's ready to go each and every single morning, and that's to be appreciated. And I just want to say thank you, because for a guy like me, you might have to listen to a podcast or two.
Not gonna out talent anyone, but I'll outwork you.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. I mean, listen. You're the Jacob Hurtubise. Speaking of Jacob Hurtubise,
I like Jacob Hurtubise a lot.
No, I'm just being honest. I mean, he's probably not got the most talent per se, but there's no doubt in my mind that he's got the most out of his ability. Which, to be honest, at the end of your career, that should be the thing that I think you probably look back on and be the proud about the most. Is how much did you get out of your ability? Hey, listen, I think we mentioned at the top of the show, Hurtubise, Fairchild, and Dunn, to be very clear, I don't think any of them did anything tonight that made them stand out and or above and make you think that decision became a lot easier. So whether or not they go out and get somebody last minute, like you had mentioned, wait and see. But I do know this, and this is my take on all of it. We have a better player that's on the last roster spot. This is no disrespect to Bubba Thompson, but he's better than Bubba Thompson. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Maybe even, I don't remember who the 25th man was, but probably better than him too last year. Trace, the roster construction for this game was interesting. So for those of you who obviously you weren't able to watch, side note on that, I'd love to see them find a way to broadcast this game in the future. There's probably some logistical reason why they can't, but I was walking through the concourse and the Dayton TV broadcast, which you've heard me talk and rave about a lot on this show. They actually had it broadcast with the scorebook and everything in the concourse. It's like, why can't they get this up for the fans? I'm sure there's some MLB rule or something stupid, but nonetheless, it's a great broadcast. I'd love to have the fans see it. But nonetheless, the roster was very interesting because the Reds' top prospects, which was the official name for the team, was the AAA roster.
Yes.
Maybe there was a few other players that slipped in there, but it was essentially what you would expect their opening day AAA lineup to be. Most of the pitchers were AAA. And then the Reds roster was your typical Reds team outside of Chase Petty started the game. Struggled a bit with his command, but he was fine overall. And then after 4 innings, when most of those guys left the game, and I think some left in the 5th, then it was all the prospects that aren't in AAA. So Sal Stewart, Edwin Arroyo, I think Leo Balcazar, Dominic Batelli, they all came in, and they were actually filling in the Reds team. So it was a little bit of an interesting construction. I'm sure I know we were talking with some people, and it was obviously logistically hard to get all the prospects here.
Right.
The Louisville team just comes up here, and they're busing right down to Louisville right after is what I believe. So it was a little bit of a different setup, based on kind of our expectations coming in. But that's kind of how it played out. So when you wake up and you see the Reds prospects beat the Reds 7-5, it was like, well, the Reds AAA team beat the Reds and the Reds prospects 7-5.
Yeah, and let's also be very clear: none of the big league starters threw tonight for the Reds side, so it wasn't a true Reds versus the prospects game in and of itself, and that's not what it was meant to be, anyways. So anybody that's going to run with that headline or try to make a joke about the Reds can't even beat their own prospects, I'm sure that will exist somewhere, but it's just the farthest thing from the truth.
Just means the future's bright, Trace.
I knew that was coming too. I was actually going to lead the show with a joke like that, but I just thought we'd lose all of our listeners because they thought we were being serious. Spencer Steer did DH for the prospects. People are asking online, like, why is he hitting if he's on the IL? Shoulders are unique, where I think it's a situation where when you're trying to throw a baseball with a shoulder situation, when you extend your elbow and or your arm above your head, your shoulder does different things than when you use it as your back shoulder, right? So Spencer Steer's right shoulder is on his back side of his swing. He's not really doing much with that shoulder when he's swinging, which is why he's able to do that, for those that are wondering. And it's just nice to see him get some at bats. He had a good at bat, hit the ball the other way relatively hard. It was an out, but it was just nice to see him at least progress, because let's be honest, we have a little shell shock with this spring training news that this guy's going to be on the IL to start the year, whether it be like Lodolo or Matt McClain last year, where he goes on the IL, Nick, and then all of a sudden it's supposed to be soon, and then all of a sudden it's just the end of the year. Shut him down. He's got to get surgery. That might still happen. I'm not suggesting it's not going to at all, but it was just nice to maybe see that maybe he is closer than what some of us have deemed.
In last report I heard, he is throwing already. I'm sure they just didn't want to get him in this game, in this environment, throwing. The report was that he's going to continue to rehab with the team and go on a rehab assignment soon, continuing to throw, continuing to work out, all those kind of things. So I think he can throw right now. It's not that he can't throw. They just didn't want to have him throw yet in a game setting. So we'll see. I mean, I thought he looked pretty comfortable. All 3 times hit the ball fly balls to the outfield. So, I didn't see any missing or anything like that. So overall, he looked pretty good. I'll be more interested when he starts playing games and we start seeing what he looks like in the field. Because, Spencer Steer could help the Reds if he can't be in the field, but he's not going to help the Reds nearly as much as if he can be in the field because, the Reds have a lot of guys that can play that can fill the DH spot right now. That's not necessarily the issue. It's, getting another outfielder that you can throw into the mix. So him being able to field a position, I think is really, really important. And I would rather be cautious and wait longer for him to be able to field a position than rush him back just at DH. And if he honestly was rushed back, that's probably not good anyways for his injury.
Well, the Reds aren't going to have an issue of trying to fill the DH role, especially at the beginning of the year right now when guys are healthy. Maybe if you get back to me in the middle of June or July and something happens to where, last year towards the end of the year, we were kind of scratching our heads at how is this guy DHing? No disrespect to Santiago Espinal, but I'll never understand why he DH'd because he's the best fielder we got. I digress. Will Banfield, he was a guy that you had mentioned that you kind of took note of. I thought that perhaps he had the most impressive night for the prospects, if you're going to call him that. Hit a ball. The hardest hit ball of the night was Will Benson, in my opinion, to right field. But the ball that was hit the best on a line, dead center field, Will Banfield, right over the 402 sign. And I also thought he did a pretty good job catching as well. Guy that came over, I think you said from the Marlins. I'm not saying Austin Wynns is a guy that's older, right? You don't know exactly how this is all going to play out and pan out. I've made jokes to you, all preseason and spring training about, are we sure Austin Wynns isn't good? Listen, I'm not naive here. I get you can go to Baseball Reference and look at it all. Maybe there's a chance where he gets a chance at some point this season, and hopefully he takes it and runs with it.
You never have too many catchers. That's for certain. He's had a nice spring. I don't think his batting average looked all that impressive, but if you looked at any of the StatCast numbers on him, every time this guy hit the ball incredibly hard. I think he had 23 home runs in AAA in 2023, so he does have some power. I know that Francona talked a lot about Austin Wynns, about the familiarity he has with the pitching staff. And sometimes we forget about that's the most important job of a catcher. Right. He caught a lot of these guys last year, not just in the big leagues. He caught them in AAA as well. Guys like, Rhett Lauder that came through. So he has a lot of familiarity. And that's really important, especially when you have a new catcher in Trevino, who by all accounts has certainly got up to speed. He got a contract extension out of it. But I think the familiarity is probably the biggest thing that Wynns has as an advantage right now. And hopefully that'll showcase on the pitch. I know we were talking a little bit, while we're here about how interested we are to see about how good a defensive catcher actually helps you, because it's a great thing to debate. I don't really know the answer. We haven't really had a whole lot of great defensive catchers in the Reds organization in recent memory that we can actually see what it looks like over 162 games. We've seen it. So I'm fascinated to see actually how big of an impact that can have.
Well, I was going to say, we've seen it in small spurts, which is when we play the Brewers, right? Yeah. Contreras, you'd watch their games and you're like, how in the world are these guys getting all these pitches? And it's just like, maybe it's because the catcher just does a really good job of sticking it every single time, and eventually he just fools the umpire into thinking that's a strike. We've never had that luxury. That's no disrespect to Tyler Stevenson, but that's just the truth. We'll see. I'm with you. I don't know what it'll mean. I do know this. Trevino picked a ball that Petty spiked early in the game. He spiked it about 55 feet, and Trevino made it look like it was no problem catching it. Now, whether or not he's going to be capable of being a Gold Glove catcher like he's been in the past, we'll wait and see. You never know, but certainly the signs point to still the fact that he can, at least pick it defensively. And he did get a hit tonight. So, maybe we'll get lucky. And that's one thing that I've always, been hopeful for with Trevino is if he gets a chance to play every day, does that help him offensively to get in a little bit better rhythm? And will his overall numbers for the year look better if he gets more opportunities at the plate? Because he's not really had that a lot as of recent, just because he's more of a defensive guy. Sporadic at times of being able to get some at bats, but ultimately, we'll see is kind of where we're at with that. And, I don't know.
He had a sneaky good BP. Yeah. He was hitting some balls hard.
He was, but I'm not going to sit here and get rattled about BP and what these guys look like. Cause I will tell you two things I've seen at BP. One is I seen right over my left shoulder. You can probably see where he was hitting it at. I was like, who's hitting? Stuart Fairchild's hitting absolute nukes over the left center field wall. And I'm telling you, that's when you know how good these guys are. Like, you watch games, they can kind of get morphed out, or you can't really tell because they got their competition is just kind of bringing them down. But at BP, when you watch these guys hit, you realize how good these guys are at this game. And I know that some people might not understand what I'm saying. I'm just imploring you, if you ever get a chance, go watch big league hitters take batting practice, and you'll quickly find out and realize that these guys are all unbelievable, athletes. I don't think that's earth shattering news, but the other thing I seen was that Carlos Jorge in spring training last year. I think I came back to the house that we were staying at in Arizona and told you, I was like, Carlos Jorge, I was watching him hit. He's like, this little short guy. I was like, man, he didn't really have a whole lot of pop. Well, I don't know if you know, Nick, but he hits absolute bombs. So I'm 0 for 2 on spring training results. So I'm not, or batting practice results. So I'm not going to put too much stock into it.
Last thing I would want to talk about is before the whole game, we got a chance to sit in on some interviews with Terry Francona, Chris Valakia, TJ Friedl, and Freddie Benavidez. Did I miss anyone? Any takeaways for you on those?
No, I mean, I think they were all kind of the standard answer. I do think that there was 2 things that were relatively interesting. Valakia said something. Listen, the hitting coaches, I'm still going to stand by this. I am going to stand by it till the day I die. I'm not saying they're worthless. I'm not saying they're worthless at all, but I'm not going to say that the hitting coach makes a huge difference one way or the other on whether or not these guys are going to be successful or not. Some people are probably going to think I'm an idiot for saying something like that. Some people are going to agree with me. I don't care. My point is that really when you're at this level, you've played this long, you're a professional, you're going to have to pretty much figure it out on your own more times than not. Hitting coaches there more or less to provide some insight from time to time, but they're not going to be able to fix your swing. But he did say something interesting from an approach standpoint from Ellie De La Cruz. And they were, I think the question was something along the lines of striking out with Ellie and the amount of strikeouts he had. And I thought Valakia had a pretty insightful answer in saying, it's not so much about striking out with Ellie, it's about how he's getting to 2 strikes. Why is he getting into so many 2-strike counts? Why can't we put the ball in play before we get there? And oddly enough, very first at bat Ellie had tonight, he watched 5 pitches and not swing one. He didn't swing the bat one time, and on the 6th pitch, he struck out looking. So 6 pitches, didn't swing once. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Ellie approaches this season, whether or not he's more aggressive early in counts. But again, it's just hard to kind of get a clue on what this stuff looks like. That was one thing. And then the second thing was just, Tito as a whole. You've heard all the stories. You've heard the quotes. He says the same thing over and over again, but it's just, I'm going to be honest. I don't have anything against David Bell. It's just a breath of fresh air. It really is. Like, it's just to hear the manager be able to kind of have a little bit of humor, have the ability to dodge questions that are kind of tough to answer, but that he's just not going to answer it, but he gives you an insightful answer regardless. I just appreciate it, if nothing else. I'm not saying that should earn you any points in this industry of being able to answer questions and relate to the media, but Terry Francona is light years ahead of David Bell in that regard. And as a fan, to be honest, that's kind of appreciated.
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me, obviously, you talked earlier when we opened the show about how he lobbied for a game like this in Dayton and thought the importance of this. I think that was great, and I kind of the getting out of Arizona into kind of a good acclimation. That part of it was good. But Francona was asked, I don't remember the exact question, but he was asked something about how you feel about going into the season. He said, "Look, there's been times I've come to the season feeling great. We start 1-9, and there's been other times I'm like, I don't know what's going on, and we start off hot." So it was just interesting to see a big league manager kind of just like, look, I don't know what's going to happen. It kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
You have no prediction if a team gets hot or cold at the beginning of the year. And you go look back through some of the years, we've seen Reds teams that start off incredibly hot and finish 20 games below 500. We've seen Reds teams, start cold and dig out. Not as many as we would have liked.
Yeah.
2020 is the one that comes to mind there. They did kind of,
right.
That was a weird season in itself.
Yes.
But it was just interesting that he was kind of honest about like, hey, sometimes my feeling means absolutely nothing in terms of what actually happens come Thursday.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think that is interesting with Tito that he said was he's just excited to get into the grind of the season and figure out who they are. He even mentioned, hey, if we win on opening day, everyone's going to talk about how we're going to the World Series. And if we lose on opening day, everyone's going to talk about how we're the worst. He said Friday is going to be the most overreact day in the sports calendar. And he's not wrong. But at the same time, I am very much with him. I think he's excited just to get back into the thick of it. Let a month and a half pass, and you're going to start to figure out what this team actually looks like. And, I think that the boldest optimist can say, hey, we're going to get a lot of good production out of these young guys. Even though they had injuries last year, they're going to bounce right back. I'm mainly talking about CES and Matt McLain. And maybe you can even toss in Jake Fraley or TJ Friedl there. And I would say the pessimists could also just say, hey, listen, there's too many question marks on this team right now. The bullpen is maybe primed to be a disaster. The offense is going to struggle, and this team may be lucky to win 78 games. Both of we find ourselves kind of back in the same position we were at the beginning of last season, Nick. And I feel like we just lost last season to injuries where we didn't get the answers we were hoping for this year. And that's my main thing when I go into this year and again, this might sound pessimistic and I don't mean it to be this way, is like, I just need to get some solid answers out of what we think is our core, because we can't move forward as a franchise until we know what Matt McLain is for sure, until we know what CES is for sure. Third base, let's be honest, we thought it was Marte. In 2 years removed from that, he's not even a part of the question. He's not even part of a conversation over there anymore. Is TJ Friedl going to be a legitimate big league player, or is he just a flash in the pan for a year, gets hurt a lot? I don't know. These are things that need to be answered. And I'm hopeful that we get to find out how good of baseball players they are, not they're on the IL a bunch and maybe they're something. And again, not trying to compare Nick Lodolo to this, but let's be honest, we can't have too many more Nick Lodolo type situations where we really love them, but they're not around enough. And nobody can predict that. Nobody can predict that, and time will tell.
We didn't get to see any of them tonight, but the thing that I'm most excited about and the thing that gives me the most hope is there's certainly some concerns with this team and certainly things that have to go right. It's just the starting pitching. And I talked with several people, that are close with the Reds today, and that's the thing that I think this team's got to hang their hat on. It is not just 1 through 5, it's 1 through 8, 9. This team has lots of starting pitching options, and if you're finding yourself in that pessimistic quarter, which it's fine, I understand, go look through the Reds starting pitching roster. There's incredible depth there, and I really believe that is what can keep the Reds in the race to the end of the season, is just that starting pitching depth.
All right. Well, any other final thoughts here as we wrap up from Air Ballpark in Dayton, Ohio? Again, the celebration game, 25th year in Dayton. They've been selling out what seems like every single game since they opened. If you've not got a chance to come up here, it's your typical minor league atmosphere in regard to the activities that go on in the middle of the innings. It's a lively atmosphere. It's fun, energetic. But even more so, the ballpark is beautiful. The development that they've done around the ballpark also kind of adds to that atmosphere. I have been here, like I said, I lived here for 10 years. None of this development was really around the ballpark when I lived here. So if you've not been back, maybe it's been 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I would encourage you to find a way to come back up here. And you're going to get to, again, you're going to get to watch some legitimate, good ball players. We'll find out who's obviously in Dayton here relatively soon. They're going to start their season, on the April 8th. That'll be their first homestand, a 6-game homestand. And then maybe you'll want to wait till it gets a little bit warmer. I could understand. But nonetheless, encourage anybody, if they haven't made the trip up to Dayton or down to Dayton, depending on where you live, I would do so. Just an overall great ballpark, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Fingers crossed Sammy Staffer and Alfredo Duno are on the rosters here. They would be two really exciting players to come see.
All right. Well, as always, plans for opening day. We are going to be live for a significant amount of the day. We're going to have a pregame show, going to have a live watch along, and then we'll do the postgame show as usual. But until then, we appreciate you. We love you. Spread the word about Chatterbox Reds. And as always, go Reds.